Good afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone and welcome. My name is Teresa Ladrigan-Welpley and I serve as the director of the Bannon Institutes in the Ignatian Center for Jesuit Education. The work of the Ignatian Center is to exemplify and activate Santa Clara University's Jesuit Catholic character of education through dialogue, reflection, and action. One of the ways we seek to do this is through the work of our thematic Bannon Institutes, which hosts interdisciplinary faculty collaboratives, a podcast series, public lectures, and roundtable dialogues like we are convening today. Our present Bannon Institute takes up the question and call, is there a common good in our common home? A summons to solidarity. In this quarter, we focus on issues of economic justice and the common good. At the World Meeting of Popular Movements in Bolivia, Pope Francis reflected, "The economy should not be a mechanism for accumulating goods, but rather the proper administration of our common home. This entails a commitment to the fitting distribution of its goods among all. Such an economy is not only desirable and necessary, but also possible. It is no utopia. It is an extremely realistic prospect. We can achieve it. The available resources in our world, the fruit of the intergenerational labors of peoples, and the gifts of creation more than suffice for the integral development of each person and the whole community. Economic justice, in Pope Francis's view, is a realistic prospect to be realized for and with each person across the global community. What constitutes such a just economy? What notions of fairness and practices of justice underwrite such an economy? In today's roundtable dialogue, we'll be invited to wrestle with these questions, and our dialogue partners will be one another as well as our panelists, who comprise the Bannon Institute Faculty Collaborative on Economic Justice and the Common Good. Our panelists are faculty who are convening over a 2-year period to collaborate on research, teaching, and university initiatives that advance economic justice and the common good. The collaborative is chaired by our Bannon Faculty Fellow, Bill Sundstrom, professor in the Economics Department. And our Bannon Institute scholars in the collaborative are Kitty Murphy in the Religious Studies Department, Laura Nichols in the Sociology Department, John Ifcher in the Economics Department, Srila Sakar in the Communication Department, and Ann Baker in the Political Science Department. And each of them are joining you now at table for our opening luncheon dialogue. But to set the stage for today's roundtable, we wanted to open with a brief compilation from this season of Integral, the new Bannon Institute podcast on the common good that features the contributions of each of our panelists around questions of economic justice. Then Bill Sundstrom will give us some driving directions for our opening dialogue exercise that you have at your table, inviting all of us to consider the question, what is fair in the construction of a just economy? So a little preview of Integral. How might economic justice be realized across the chasms that presently define the U.S. social order? Does access to technology bring about a leveling of economic and social hierarchies? Do classical economic models teach us to privilege our own self-interest as the most efficient means to the good? And the Christian scriptural tradition, what is economic justice?
The share of national income going to the top 1% in the United States has roughly doubled over the past 4 decades, from 10% to 20%. Meanwhile, the share of the bottom half fell by nearly the same amount. If by equality of opportunity, we mean that one's life chances are not dictated by the circumstances of one's birth and childhood, then the United States fails to provide it. In turn, we must conclude that economic rewards do not always flow from desert or merit.
Globally, access to technology is rapidly being considered as a cure for deep economic and social divisions. We see that access can actually reinforce societal inequities and create new ones.
Today, the social class you were born into is the greatest predictor of your likelihood of graduating from college. The success of our students in graduating with the necessary skills and ethical foundations provides a valued good to our communities.
We want students to think, when I make this decision, it's going to have impacts on other people. Maybe I should take those other impacts into consideration in my decision making as opposed to just do what's best for me.
Pope Francis called our economy one of exclusion and inequality, and he said, "Such an economy kills."
What is the impact of what may turn out to be biased representation on the functioning of democracy and our well-being as a nation?
Is there a common good in our common home?
So that's just a preview of what's to come. We'll hear more from each of these collaborative members later in the program. But to kick off our roundtable, we'll begin with an exercise at our tables around the question, what is fair? And Bill Sundstrom will explain more. So, Bill.
Thank you, Teresa. Glad to see everybody here, and I encourage you all to go listen to the full podcasts. They were fun to produce and hopefully enlightening in various degrees. So we thought we would start out this lunch without a bunch of talking heads up here talking at you. We'll save a little time for that in the middle, but would start with a little bit of an assignment for you all to discuss at your table, and it's fairness exercise number 1 is the side of the page that you want to look at. And I think everybody is well aware that notions of economic justice and what's a fair economic situation is a highly contested question. There are many possible elements, some of them in conflict with each other as to what would constitute economic justice or fairness. We'll ask you here to think about what your preferred conception might look like, and to prompt you for that, we've given you a list of potential definitions of fairness for the basis on which to allocate burdens and benefits in society. So I won't read through the whole list, but you've got them there, bulleted items. A couple of them may use language that is obscure except to students of philosophy, so you have a couple of footnotes to pay attention to for definitions. So those I hope will be helpful. And what we want you to do is just take a look at these for a couple minutes. What do you think is the formulation that's the most fair of these? You may have a tie, but try to make a decision. Give that the letter M. The one you think is next most fair, give that the letter N, as in Nancy, and the formulation you think least fair with the letter L. And then we invite you with some facilitation by our collaborative colleagues to discuss your choices. Why did you rank these formulations the way you did? What assumptions informed your selection? Or do you have qualms about the entire enterprise? Is there perhaps something missing? Are there some other formulations you'd like to bring up? And then what we'll do is we're going to take about 10 to 15 minutes for this exercise. We'll hear from some of the collaborative members and see whether that stimulates some further thought on your thinking for the fairness. I don't suppose we'll come away with the final consensus answer on this, but hope to stimulate some of your thinking on these issues. So I invite you to go ahead, keep on eating, and make your choices, and we'll discuss those. And we'll be back up here in a bit.
So thank you all. We've begun a conversation that has many layers. At least at our table, I would say there's many kind of qualifications within each dimension or formulation that we've begun to unpack. We had much more agreement around what was least fair than in negotiating the most or the next. I don't know if that was common in other tables. But we've begun to open up these questions of fairness, of economic justice, and the common good. And we'd like to hear now from our contributors to this collaborative how they've engaged this question around what is fair and what is just within each of their disciplinary perspectives, and see how that might shape, challenge, or maybe affirm some of the notions of fairness that we've begun to unpack this afternoon. So I'd just like to invite up our collaborative members that we've introduced already to share with us a little bit and maybe add another layer to our dialogue. So, yay, collaborative.
Hi.
Okay, we're going to hear from our collaborative faculty members here, and in two chunks. So there are actually, although it looks like there's only 5 of us, there's actually 6, because one of them is going to join us through the marvels of video recording. She happens to be at Ann Baker happens to be at a conference presenting some related work, so couldn't be here with us today physically. So we're going to do have three people talk briefly about their work with the collaborative and reflecting on some of these questions that we've raised for you all, and then we're going to give you a chance, just a few minutes, to provide a little break before the next 3 to engage with each other about whether there was any ideas that came out of those presentations to inform your judgments on some of these issues. So we're going to start with Kitty Murphy, Laura Nichols, and John Ifcher to talk about their work. And I think they've already been introduced, and they need no introduction. So, Kitty, take it away.
Let me set my timer on myself first. As a biblical scholar who studies early Judaism and Christianity, I approach the question of what is fair not in absolute and present terms, as in what makes something fair for us today, but in terms of how the early Jews and Christians answered the question. How did they address issues of economic fairness? I want to understand the economic realities they faced in order to understand the values they embedded in texts and practices that have become normative in Western history and that remain normative for Christian and Jewish communities today. I think you could find biblical proof texts of most of the fairness definitions we have on the table today, but I don't find that a very interesting way to approach either the question of the economic good or the interpretation of the Bible. You just end up with a host of conflicting viewpoints and no mechanism for judging the relative value of the various definitions. Instead, in my research and teaching, I try to reconstruct the material situation and the larger worldview of the original communities who wrote the biblical texts in order to appreciate not only what they said, but why they said it. And on issues of economic fairness and the common good, there are a couple of fundamental assumptions that the early Jews and Christians made that shaped their answers to the question of fairness. The most important one is that they understood the material world to be a gift from God, that is, from a creator outside the realm of worldly players. While that might strike a secular audience today as mythological or quaint, consider the way the claim of the transcendent functions. It creates a level playing field when it comes to human claims to the goods of the earth. As Jesus puts it in the Gospel of Matthew, God makes the sun rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. That wouldn't seem exactly to encourage ethical behavior or to create much of a meritocracy. In fact, it grounds the Christian command to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, which would seem self-defeating in a world or an economy based on self-interest. Or consider the parable Jesus tells of the laborers in the vineyard. The owner hires laborers at 9 a.m., noon, 3 o'clock, and 5 o'clock, so some work 10 hours, others 7 hours, others 4, and some merely 2 hours. But the owner pays them all an equal wage. How fair is that if merit is the measure? There's a different metric at work here, a different calculus. In my research right now, I'm examining 2 early Christian practices based on this very different worldview. A worldview that not only imagines an unfairly generous God, but that encourages people to perform that same generosity. One practice is the provision of daily bread for those most in need. In a subsistence economy like the Roman Empire, poverty meant a lack of food and nutrition for many. Roman economic historians imagine that as much as 70% of the population lived at or below minimal subsistence, meaning they didn't get enough nutrition. It appears that early Christians addressed that economic imbalance by aggressive food redistribution among their members, and this is a living symbol of the image they had of a generous God. The second Christian practice is the relief of debt. In the Gospels, in Paul's letters, and in many early Roman and Christian testimonies of the first 2 centuries of Christianity, we hear that Christians loaned money or other goods to each other without expectation of return, not only of the interest, but of the principal. Those of you familiar with the Gospel of Luke might recall John the Baptist's advice to the crowds: whoever has 2 coats must share with anyone who has none, and whoever has food must do likewise. No interest rate is stipulated. No requirement is mentioned that the person receiving must deserve the goods. That appears to be presumed, and the onus is on the giver to realize that the goods are not entirely their own. The receiver need not even be a member of the Christian community. The larger worldview grounds the practice. I study the past rather than the present, but I understand the analysis of the past to be a resource for communities that still hold these biblical texts to be normative, such as Santa Clara University, a Jesuit Catholic institution. What would it mean for our university to evaluate its distribution of resources in terms of meeting the needs of the neediest? What sort of witness might the university provide of its Christian Catholic identity if the eradication of debt became a priority now, as it was in the earliest communities? If the prodigal generosity of God, rather than more miserly calculations of merit or of relative valuations based on supply and demand, shaped the commitments of our common life here at Santa Clara, let alone in our larger common home. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being with us. So my project is looking at Catholic schools specifically today, and by understanding our past, as well as asking how Catholic schools participate in the context of the economic systems of today. And by past, I'm not going as far back as Kitty goes, obviously, because I'm focusing on the United States. But the founding of Catholic schools, such as Santa Clara in the United States, as well as the K-12 Catholic school system, was partially done in response to discrimination against Catholics in the school systems of the late 1800s into the 1900s. And while Catholic schools enrolled the rich and poor alike, Catholic schools of the past provided the opportunity for quite a dramatic case of social mobility for poor, new immigrant Irish, Italian, and other white ethnic Catholics. So how is this working today? Let's take higher education as an example. Recently, high school students received a welcome to Santa Clara letter, and they were deciding, I think May 1st was the big decision. And admission systems are set up, obviously, to reward what? Merit, yes. Set up to provide merit and individual effort. And each student accepted to Santa Clara earned their spot. We tend to see this as a very fair system. But who ultimately attends and graduates depends on many other factors. It's usually those from the wealthiest families who are most likely to enroll and graduate. So here at Santa Clara University, according to the Equality of Opportunity Project, 65% of students here come from families in the top 20% of family income. That's our undergraduate students. And the wealthy also tend to attend schools with the best graduation rates. So we have one of the highest graduation rates of schools like us. And this is true for students regardless of family income and first-generation college status. So our students graduate at high rates across all different calculus. But who's most likely to be here at SCU? Students who would excel and graduate at most universities. This pattern holds true among other what are so-called elite institutions of higher education. We know that financial aid has not kept up with increases in public and private tuitions. Students who need places like Santa Clara for the best chance to graduate usually instead go to schools with very low graduation rates, and few ultimately earn their degrees. So what's fair in this scenario? What happens if a system seems fair on one standard of fairness, but only to a point? And what is lost for our society when it's mainly the wealthy who are able to actualize the most coveted spots in higher education? So do Catholic schools like Santa Clara or other Catholic schools have a responsibility, as well as the imagination, to respond to the needs of new immigrants and their children today? What would need to happen or change for a fair system in higher education to exist? And as Kitty mentioned, could Catholic colleges be a witness and a better model of a different system as a means of economic justice and the common good?
Hello. So in thinking about this exercise and preparing for today, Laura and I in some ways came to the exact same answer, so hopefully I won't bore you in my 3 minutes. But as an economist, one of the things we teach our students is basically in our models that what you get paid is based on what you produce, technically your marginal revenue product. And this would sort of lead you to thinking that what is fair is based, in our sheet here, to each according to their merit. And students find this pretty pleasing in class. If they contribute more, they're going to make more, and if they contribute less, they're going to make less, and they think, oh, that seems pretty fair to me. Now, one of the challenges with that result is that it places no restriction on the distribution of resources. So you can have people who are highly meritorious making tons of money, and people who are not meritorious based on our system, our economic system, making no money. For example, if you're here not in the US and you make a minimum wage, that's $7.25 an hour outside the state of California, which is $14,500 a year for full-time work. In the state of California, a little more. If you're a daycare worker, the average wage in the US is $29,000 for someone who works at daycare full-time. Of course, they're probably taking care of children whose parents make literally 5 times as much, 4 times as much as they do. So this raises the question of, is this fair? Is it really fair to base on one's merit or their contribution to the economy? And then it raises the question, well, how did these professional parents who leave their kids with this daycare worker who's making a fraction of what they make, how did they get there, which is sort of what Laura was talking about. And so this maybe leads us to a different conception of fairness, the one that is to each according to what one would allocate from behind the veil of ignorance. Now, if you didn't have time to look at the little footnote there, the basic idea here is what you would do if you didn't know your position basically in the birth lottery. Like, who are you going to be when you're born? Who are your parents? What country are you going to be born into? Maybe that would be a better conception of fairness. And then finally, it's also important to remember that we all have basic needs, and basing fairness on merit alone doesn't necessarily address our basic needs, which would point us more towards perhaps the second idea of fairness, that to each according to individual need or basic needs. Now, I should say that as an economist, we don't have models which tell us which one of these is the best. Now, with many things in economics, we have models that say, you should do this, you should do that, this is how you should allocate resources, this is how you should do this, and this is the best thing. And we don't have that when it comes to fairness. So we don't have a model that tells us what's most fair. And I think that that leaves a lot of economists a little antsy. And so often we just remain agnostic and just sort of shy away from conversations about it in class.
All right, we're going to give you a 5-minute break to think about some of those ideas. And what we'd propose that you do now at this little juncture is maybe say hello to the neighbor to your, do you like right or left? Let's go left. Perhaps some kind of bias here. Introduce yourself to the neighbor to your left, and then we'll go all the way around, and no one will talk to anybody. So you can see I'm not used to these round tables are a problem. Meet a neighbor and take a couple minutes to reflect on whether any of this discussion has helped inform some of your judgment about these issues, and then we're going to move right back in and hear from the remainder of the panel before we open it up to general conversation. So, thank you.
Ignorance in our table.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, she did. I think she's kind of read a lot. She's kind of problematized that idea. That it doesn't really work. I was just saying Sarita has thought a lot about the veil of ignorance, so she talked a lot about that at our table. And just that, you know, it doesn't work out, basically. It doesn't work.
It's a nice hypothetical, but
yeah, but people are still you're unable and you don't understand enough about
This,
to be able to step back enough. I didn't articulate it as well.
okay.
It'd probably be interesting for you guys to have a conversation and know more about it.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that I think it's very hard. This happened at our table,
Yeah.
where the question is what's fair, and then everyone wants to talk about what's possible,
Right.
Yeah.
right? And we had that go on over here, where like someone suggested like, well, you can't have an equal share because it just doesn't work, right?
Right.
And then we had, and like, yeah, but the question isn't does it work? Do you have a system? It's like what actually would be fair? I just want to. So maybe the veil of ignorance doesn't work in practice, but does that mean it's unfair?
If it could really work.
Yeah, that's a different
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Is she saying that it's hard to like bracket your identity in the real world? Like, is that like because you will be who you are, like shaped by your gender or by your class, so it's really hard to be.
well, that was the same thing that came up at our table. Nobody could imagine these hypothetically because they were all thinking of all of the limitations to each of those definitions in practice. They just don't work out very well.
I mean,
I
the
appreciate
veil of
that you
ignorance.
address those more.
What?
I appreciate that you address those in your, you know, that at least you kind of tried that, because I think that's, we kind of left people with these,
Right,
you know, and then I was like, oh, I didn't really talk about them that much. I mean, I got like 3 little things, but.
I think the veil of ignorance is often criticized for that it's not, it doesn't allow for the particularness of actual human subjects. But it's, to me, it's just a way of disciplining thought about fairness questions, right? I mean, in some sense, if you think that there's that impartiality, or maybe I guess the way Rawls would say it is that, the way justice can't have you treated arbitrarily, right? There's so many things about where you end up in life, are accidents of birth, and those are arbitrary from a moral point of view. So how are you going to get around, think rigorously about what's arbitrary as opposed to, it's just sort of a device for that. But I think it works better for thinking about sort of just economic distribution than pushing it to the question of, identity. It's hard. It's not a good theory for dealing with identity questions.
Well, I mean, the way I understand the veil of ignorance, though, I actually like it. Like, to me, it says, like, if you didn't know who you were, you would actually bargain for who was the most marginalized, right?
Yeah.
So for me, like, it's like, okay, so if I didn't know, like, I was going to be a black man, but my rights, like, I was the most persecuted, hopefully, like, that's what I would push for because it's my self-interest. So I actually kind of like the veil of ignorance, I mean, and sort of like, as you said, disciplining thought. I mean, not that it's really possible maybe in the real world to bracket identities.
It'll be interesting to see. I mean, we're going to have a discussion, right? I mean, I don't think it's going to come up specifically necessarily.
Somebody picked that at my table too, like a few people, veil of ignorance,
I wonder what, I suppose I'm supposed to get
4 or 5 people at my table agreed that the majority's vote was bad.
That was a popular
too.
least favorite.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so people really picked up on what that was. I mean, because it did come from, it was a Nazi thing? Was it a Nazi?
It's what is it, like the general will, or like
Oh,
isn't
yeah,
it
yeah.
the Nazi
that's a
Association?
good
Yeah.
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 Anyway,
It's good as long as you agree with the majority.
Right,
Works out great.
exactly.
And I think people at the table said, like, well, look what happened to Trump. I mean, you know, technically, well, we can debate that, but technically the majority.
he didn't
but,
get the majority vote.
well, that's what I said. Like,
electoral.
He got the majority electoral
right,
college,
yeah.
yeah. He got a majority of small states
Right.
that are overweighted in the
But
electoral
you know,
college.
if a society has to sort of choose a constitution, say, that's going to set the ground rules for allocating a just way, and there are serious differences of opinion, so different people accept different bullet points on the list, then you have to adjudicate these things. And maybe majority rule is not the worst way to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, the
The
problem
problem
is
is that the majority always wins then.
well, no, and the majority could be a hateful majority.
Yeah, no, that's clearly a
That's
problem.
the
Hard to
problem,
ever
right?
bust
Who wants to keep the power of laws
Yeah.
intact? Yeah.
So,
Okay, this month we're going by majority. Next month we're going by who needs the most. Who's talking to me? That could be dangerous.
our conversation started a little slow. And
Yeah,
took a
yeah,
while.
yeah.
Did yours start out slow?
The table was pretty
Except for one
animated.
person, she was like, hey,
Mine's on.
yeah.
Hello, I'm sorry to interrupt.
I mean, there's no students here, which I'm kind of like,
I know we were both kind of trying to make the college connection.
Try again.
Not even
Okay.
here.
Folks, we're gonna take another little interlude here to hear from the rest of our panel, and then we'll get you back to conversing, maybe as a party of the whole. So our second half of speakers here are Professor Ann Baker in political science, Srila Sarkar from Women's Gender Studies, and myself. Sorry, communication. Well, there you go. And we'll have a couple of quick presentations here and then really move to a general question and answer. Thanks.
I don't mind being in generous, I'd like to.
Hi, I'm Ann Baker. I'm in the political science department here at Santa Clara University, and I study money in politics. Particularly, I look at the influence of campaign spending, campaign contributions on the representation that members of Congress provide. When we think about fairness in relation to political representation, I think the hope is that members of Congress will provide representation based upon need or merit or societal contribution or some combination of all of those things, depending on whatever issue they're considering at a given time. And it's also the case that we certainly know they cannot provide equal representation perfectly to every single one of their constituents all of the time, because they're human beings and that would be impossible. However, it's also the case that certain constituents are not going to turn out to vote. So those constituents are non-voters. And then usually another large portion of their constituency are going to be of the opposite party, right? They're not going to share the partisanship of their member of Congress. So the member may have some reason to not pay as much attention to those sets of constituents. But even so, the hope is that constituents in these categories are not going to go without any representation at all. And at a minimum, we also hope that members of Congress will not give greater weight to the preferences of certain constituents in ways that might fundamentally advantage certain groups of citizens over others, right, and thereby disadvantaging the other group. So neglect is one issue here, and I think that harm is another issue. So with this in mind, when I examine the influence of political contributions on the behavior of members of the House, what I find is that they tend to be more responsive to the policy and ideological preferences of their donors rather than their constituents. And that's for members who are highly dependent upon individual donor contributions. And this wouldn't be such a big problem if those donors were also constituents. However, most most of the donor pool for most of the members of the House lies outside of their districts. And so constituents are getting shortchanged a bit because non-constituents are getting more of a say. So the House members who are highly dependent upon this money and might be neglecting their constituents are actually not doing their jobs very well. While I don't have tests currently to see whether they provide material advantages to donors, I do find that the members who are the most dependent upon contributions from outside of their districts are also the most polarized members of the House. So these dependencies could actually prove harmful not only to their constituents, but also to the functioning of our democracy. So currently I'm examining donor preferences more closely just to get a better understanding of what motivates contributors to give to members of Congress, and particularly members of Congress who are not their own, right? So members that are in other districts or other states. And what I find initially is that they do seem to be seeking additional representation from multiple members of Congress. And it is also clear that the policy preferences of these donors do not mirror those of average voters. So that means that the chance that they could distort representation by slanting it in their favor is quite high. And if that is happening, then that's unfair in a democratic sense. And it could, of course, contribute to economic injustices in public policy provisioning by Congress over time. And I'll just close by saying, though, that it is very complicated to determine what is actually fair in politics. So hopefully you will have some discussion about that.
All right, so from Anne's thinking about the question of voice and representation in a democracy, I'm just going to move from one democracy to the other. I'm going to move to India, the space of India, which is where I work, the world's largest democracy. And I'm a scholar of communication and media, and what I study through ethnographic work, which means actually doing field work in communities in New Delhi, which is the capital city of India, is I studied this very celebrated notion of access to technology and crossing the digital divide, because there's really an increasing optimism in the world, and this is where a lot of development dollars are being spent, that if you give people access to technology, this is like a magic bullet, and it's really an opportunity for developing nations or nations in the global south to catch up and become developed very rapidly. So my work, which is actually at an intersection of gender studies, communication and policy and law studies, is critically examining this notion of crossing the digital divide and actually asking if access to technology really brings about more embedded notions of fairness and equal opportunities and inclusion in the global economy. So India is really known, among other things, is known for its flourishing IT industry, and it's really become a symbol of the kind of modernity that India is associated with. So what I study through my fieldwork in slums in New Delhi and what are often called resettlement colonies, which is really where it's a polite term for evicted, marginalized communities who are moved to the borders of the city. And what the IT industry does is it gives them what they call entrepreneurship and training in computer skills and soft skills. And soft skills in this case are really learning to speak English. They have really interesting, I say interesting a little sarcastically, but interesting textbooks on hygiene, which include like how to wash your hair, how to wear the right clothes, the right shoes. And this is, which has of course got very colonialist aspirations, history behind it. But really the idea here is that the IT industry has been at the opposing end of caste-based social movements who are really saying, let us practice affirmative action policies, which is that, let people come into the private sector given preferential hiring because of cost, because we've been historically discriminated for such a long time. So the IT industry has pushed back and said, no, we are really about merit and about learning. So if you know technology and if you have the appropriate soft skills,
everyone can really be an equal partner in the global economy. So I study training programs instituted by the IT industries that teach people such soft skills and IT skills. And my research finds that despite English and soft skills lessons, inequalities are not leveled, because as the discussion has been going on here, everyone really starts at a different place. So slum youth who have not grown up speaking English, through these training programs, even if you have really intense training programs, will never reach the same positions as successful IT professionals, right? White-collar IT professionals, because there are ways of being identified through diction, through accent, and I think that's really similar, not just in India, but even in the US, the way you speak cannot be overturned by just lessons, but is really embedded in your privileges of birth and class and other related identities. Further, I really examine IT programs that train youth, which promise inclusion, but what they do is train youth for lower level jobs in the information economy, such as front desk jobs in department stores or local call centers, and that these jobs are often low-paying and exploitative. And again, this is not particular to India, because one of the things that has been growing rapidly all over the world is service economy jobs, despite the promise that we are moving towards a high-tech economy, right? So even in the US, service jobs are really on the rise and continue to be. So the IT industry regards merit as neutral. This understanding of fairness or merit or equal opportunity neglects to consider how differences in economic and family-based privileges of caste and class give individuals different starting points and different opportunities for fulfillment of their capabilities. So one of the things that I often think is, and I get asked this question with my research, so okay, so what's your solution? And I wish I had a solution, but I think one of the things is that how do we really conceptualize economic justice to move away questions from individual merit to that of the greater communal good, and what sacrifice will that take from all of us, right? And I think even in the era of Trump, what would look different? If we were to do taxation, based on much more rigorous standards of how much money we make and giving back, what kind of sacrifice would that take from us? So, in the case of the IT industry in India, would you be more actively forced to participate in redistribution of resources through greater regulation, affirmative hiring practices, and other things that actually offer positions of power to marginalized individuals and communities? So I think just rethinking notions of economic justice, from a very fundamental and, if I might say, radical level is the kind of questions that my research throws up and moves towards.
All right, I'll try to be brief. I think Srila's research really exposes the complex reality behind the words equality of opportunity and meritocracy in a setting where economic, social, and cultural structures establish really unequal starting points. Class, caste, and gender, not to mention the idiosyncratic accidents of family background and parental competence, shape the life chances of individuals not only in India, of course, but all over the globe. In fact, the limitations of judging fairness or economic justice on the grounds of reward for individual merit or desert is a theme I think that obviously has emerged in several of these summaries of research by my colleagues around this round table. In spite of this, obviously, what's an extremely wide range of subject areas and methodologies. I think the principle of equality of opportunity has been, I think most of you who've grown up here would agree, a really powerful component of what I think of as the American creed. It's a principle that also is often adduced to counter egalitarian arguments. In this view, even a fairly extreme inequality of income or wealth could be justified if everyone had started at least on a level playing field. And then economic rewards would flow to hard work, talent, initiative, that is, to merit. I have some sympathies for that view. It does have some appeal, and we've heard a lot of critiques of it. But whatever the merits of merit in a society that provides equal opportunity, the argument obviously loses its appeal if there are serious inequalities of life chances. What we know about that unequal kind of world, the one that we inhabit, points toward actually more ambitious policies to mitigate income inequality and poverty, that is, toward greater egalitarianism as a grounding for what John Rawls called fair equality of opportunity. For this foreseeable future, children will be raised in families until test tubes, and family resources will play a large role in dictating life chances through health and nutrition, access to safe neighborhoods, good schools, good Catholic elite institutions of higher education, etc. Equality of opportunity in the sense of equal life chances then must rest on substantial equalizing of resources across families and communities. If equalizing life chances is a prerequisite for improving economic justice, then the dramatic increase in income and wealth inequality in the United States over the past few decades constitutes a serious setback. While concentration of income wealth at the very top, say the top 1%, has received a great deal of attention, the most pressing violations of economic justice, in my view, stem from the persistence of serious economic disadvantages that impair the life chances of large numbers of low-income Americans. In a word, poverty. In my current research, I'm focusing on multidimensional measures of poverty, particularly in the Silicon Valley context. One of the most striking features of the affluent, dynamic region in which we live is the high level of real poverty once the local cost of living is adequately accounted for. Understanding the extent and character of poverty, the causes of poverty amidst affluence, and identifying effective policy responses to mitigate it are the key concerns of my current research project. Toward these ends, I've been working with student researchers and some local organizations to measure poverty on multiple dimensions. It's not simply a matter of money, and study its variation across location and kinds of households, and to assess the extent to which local anti-poverty programs actually succeed in equalizing life chances. So I'm going to call it quits there and invite you, now that you've had an opportunity to hear from all of us and explore some of these principles, to invite your questions and comments. We'd like to hear from you. What would you like to add to these conceptions? What did we miss? Are we far off base? So with that, thank you, and let's continue the conversation. Are we going to...
At a support group I went to last night, a social worker said that homelessness and poverty level in the greater Silicon Valley area is at an all-time high. And when we started to debate that, and on the other extreme, you have the people from Google and Facebook and the unicorns that have hundreds of millions of dollars. Is this consistent with your findings? And if so, what might be the reasons for it? I've been here 47 and a half years, and I've never seen such a polarization. Thank you.
That's, I think, largely consistent with what I understand to be the case. There are official poverty measures that suggest poverty rates are very low in the Silicon Valley area, and they're completely useless for measuring actual poverty, largely because of cost of living and, in particular, housing. So we live in an area with tremendous inequities and a kind of a hidden, well, sometimes hidden and sometimes not so well hidden problem of low income status. It's an interesting food for thought, and I won't say anything much more about it, for folks who, like I am, consider that yourself a person of the left and a bit of an egalitarian, that states like California and many of the bluest states also happen to be among the most unequal states with very high rates of real poverty. And I think it's a challenge to all of us to look toward our communities. We are not going to rely very much on Washington to set things straight. So what is it in terms of policy and other interventions where we have some influence on things that can move stuff forward? So I'll just leave it at that.
Well, one thing I'm just thinking is this notion of equal opportunity, you know, is a little broad. Because, I mean, if everybody got a lottery ticket and some people, won an enormous amount and everybody else got nothing, everybody has an equal opportunity. So, and then if you just look at equal opportunities. Is this on even?
I think it's on.
Oh, okay. If you have equal opportunity, some people are just born more capable than others. So that also seems not fair from the point of view that you'd like to get the maximum value from the people that get it of what's distributed. But I do understand now from this discussion that on the one side you'd like to give to each according to his needs, and the other side each according to, like the communists used to say, to his abilities. But the problem is how to weight those two things and how to administer that, because so and all these things about fairness, over the life cycle, is this every 10 minutes that it gets evaluated, and when does the distribution happen, and when does the evaluation of contribution and all that? So markets may be the best thing we have. Anyway.
It seems like in the California context, the U.S. context, and the global context, a key part of providing genuine equal opportunity has to do with education, providing a basic level of good education for everybody, even apart from whether or not people can go to colleges like Santa Clara eventually. Two other things I wanted to mention. One is one of our own adjunct faculty said that he actually lives under the poverty line when his income is considered in relation to Santa Clara County and the cost of housing. So, are we even fair and just on our campus, let alone, the state and the country and the globe? The other aspect of education, though, that's, I think, even harder, it's hard enough to try to guarantee a good quality education to all children in the U.S., in California, or around the world. But there's also the issue of how do you educate people to understand that they need to be motivated by more than their self-interest. So when corporations off-source or try to get the lowest possible tax rate or try to pay their employees as little as possible, with some notable exceptions. I mean, some employers do treat their workers fairly and pay a living wage, and some cities and municipalities require that. But when you've got billionaires in Silicon Valley who somehow think, I need to make sure I've got my 8th billion, but I don't care what happens to the kids down the street or down the hill, as it often is. How do you educate people to be more empathetic and compassionate, as well as just have a basic level of good education that provides somewhat more of an equal playing field, as equal life chances?
John?
Listen to John's podcast.
Listen to my podcast, yeah. It's the questions you raise are fascinating to me, and I'm actively doing research on it. I also am constantly checking in with my class. I use these audience response systems where they can click in. And so one of the questions I ask my students on a regular basis, actually multiple times during the quarter, is it appropriate for the government to redistribute resources from high income to low income people using things like progressive taxes and the earned income tax credit? And I'll tell you that Santa Clara students, on a disagree, agree, Likert scale, are 50-50 about on average. And sometimes I press my students on sort of what exactly do they mean when they answer these questions. So one student who disagreed thought it was not appropriate. I said to her, so, would it be appropriate, therefore, for the government to make taxes less progressive and get rid of the earned income tax credit? Because that's an implication. And she said, yes, that is what I'm saying. So your question about selfishness, and people respond to stimulus different. So I might think I'm teaching something that's going to make someone think, oh, this is not fair. I should respond in this way to be less selfish. And someone else responds to that exact stimulus by justifying their own position already. So as an instructor who really tries not to preach to my students, I am personally struggling with how to teach in a way that doesn't cause what you're saying.
The two questions up there, what is fair and what is just? It seems like one of the basic issues we ought to consider is the fact that what is just is not necessarily always fair, and what is fair is not always necessarily just. And what we need to possibly reflect on is the fact that in society we need to reflect on the need to let people know that many of our efforts to have a just society is going to challenge the basic issue of fairness.
Any comment from that holds? So we will continue to inhabit that question and others as we go forward. So please join me in thanking our contributors and thanking all of you for your contribution today. These roundtables are a new component of the Bannon Institute, and you received an evaluation on your way in. If you can give us some feedback on this, it's really helpful for us as we continue to develop our programming and collaborations within the university. So if you could just give us some feedback there, or you'll also get an electronic evaluation by email if you RSVP. Also, if you haven't had a chance to do so, please check out the Bannon Institute podcast Integral. You heard some little pieces to kind of teasers from that in the introduction today, and some of the ways in which the contributors shared today, or you would hear more on their podcast episodes. So we just finished out our second season, which is around economic justice and the common good, and all the episodes from our first season on racial and ethnic justice and the common good are also posted. So you can find that on iTunes, SoundCloud, Podbean, wherever you access podcasts, as well as on our website. So check that out. And this is our last Bannon Institute event of the year, and so I just wanted to take a moment to publicly thank all of the staff and faculty who've contributed to the work of the Bannon Institutes over the course of this year. Certainly our panelists here and all our Bannon faculty fellows and scholars, but also Kaylee Erickson, who's our Bannon Institute program manager. Woo-hoo! As well as our Ignatian Center operations team, Nancy Diaz and Susan Chun and Mike Nuttall, who's back there, and all of our student assistants and our photographer Paige as well. So yeah, please, you already did, but please help me express gratitude to all of them, and once more to our contributors today. Thank you all very much for coming.